Excellent. Welcome, everyone. I hope everybody's having a great week. And thank you for joining. Really excited for this hands-on lab session. We're definitely going to get down and dirty, have you guys follow along with a few examples that we have prepared for you and get you signed up for a free trial of Zeppo. So just a little bit of background here as we begin. My name is Zack. I'm a solutions architect with Zeppo. I've been with the company for about 6 months now, and I'm extremely excited at where we're going. And I know that this is centered around a Snowflake specific data set that we're going to be using, as well as talking about the integration there. So yeah, we've started a great partnership with them, and I'm really excited with the direction that's headed, especially being a part of this data science space as well. So that's just a bit about me. We have Elise Phillips on the line. She's our VP of Marketing and is going to be helping out here, monitoring the Q&A, being my teaching assistant. So thank you, Elise, for your help.
My pleasure.
Yeah, and just with that, everyone on the call, I know it's a little bit challenging doing these meetings or presentations over Zoom. So if you have any questions throughout the way, please do not hesitate and put those in the chat. That'd be great. Now, as far as what I want to cover in the next hour with all of you here today is an overview of Zeppo and Snowflake. So how we work together and how we integrate. We'll talk about one slide here or two slides maybe before we jump into the product. But really the focus of this time together is going through getting you signed up for a free trial of Zeppo, connecting to, we have a sample data set in Snowflake that we want to get you connected up to. We're going to run through a data science notebook that I've pre-created, pre-populated. We're going to actually get in and run it, edit a few things, build some visualizations, connect to data, and ultimately come out the other side with a trained model. And the use case that we're going to be focusing on, that the notebook focuses on, is around anomaly detection, specifically around fraudulent transactions. So we have a big data set of transactions that are categorized as fraudulent or not, and we're gonna do some analysis there to see if we can build a model and train it to be able to predict when a transaction is likely to be fraudulent or not. And then we'll open it up for Q&A and sort of have a call to action at the end. Now, as we begin here, it is really helpful for me just to break the ice and get a good sense of who's on the call. So if you wouldn't mind putting into the Q&A section here, who of the members or the participants on the call are current Snowflake users, or you have Snowflake at your company.
And actually, you can just chat that. I chatted the question to everybody. Are you a Snowflake user? If you could just answer yes or no, that would be great.
Oh, great. Yeah, put in the chat instead of the Q&A. Great. Okay, we've got a few answers in here. It looks like some people are not Snowflake users yet, or maybe you have your data stored somewhere else. That's not a problem at all. I will show you throughout the demonstration, and you'll see in your own account here that there are lots of other data source connectors that we've built into the product.
Great. And then the next question is, do you use data science notebooks? And if so, which ones? Could be Jupyter, Zeppelin, Databricks, anything else? Just interested to know, what everybody's kind of familiarity with data science notebooks is. Great. Got a couple Jupyter users out there. Jupyter and played with Zeppelin. Great. Perfect. And Jupyter. Awesome. We actually support all both Zeppelin, Jupyter, and obviously Databricks notebooks as well. Great. And then just one last question. What's your use case for data science? What either your team's use case, or if there are other teams that you work with, what are kind of the use cases in your company that you're seeing data science most useful for? Great, some customer analytics, we see that. Financial space. Great, excellent. Thank you all for that. Useful info that we can use to kind of tailor the content. So I'll hand that back over to Zach.
Yeah, great. Thank you guys. Appreciate the feedback there. So just talking at a high level about Zeppo and how we connect into different data sources, namely Snowflake, since that was what we'll be focused on here. But you can largely replace that with any of your other major data sources, whether it's in Amazon or elsewhere. So Zeppel's a collaborative data science platform that's built on a that's delivered as a SaaS solution. And really our model is actually, very similar to Snowflake, where we want to give our customers the power to, be able to control their workloads, scale them up very efficiently, and only pay for what you use. Not have to run large infrastructure at 24/7 in order to support your workloads, but be able to use the elasticity of the cloud to do that. And what we are finding is that there really is a need to have a data science workspace that is not just good for the single data scientist, but that scales for teams, and that is collaborative in nature. And some of the things that are really important and able to deliver that are these things that you see in the middle here. So being able to connect to any data source, being able to provide the ability to write in multiple languages, Python, Scala, and R, as well as SQL, all within the same notebook environment. And then be able to support, the extension of any libraries that you might be using. Today, in our notebook, we're going to use Pandas. You'll see TensorFlow, and we'll use some connectivity into Snowflake as well. So from Zeppo, we're able to make a secure connection into Snowflake, push down a lot of the workloads into the data warehouse that you might be using, which for data scientists, a lot of times there's a need in order to process very large data sets, but only return back a subset of that data to whatever data science platform you're using. And we see that Snowflake has been a really good partner, or a really advantageous way in order to do that on a large scale. And then ultimately you have to be able to deliver a meaningful report or telling meaningful stories so that people start to adopt data science and believe in the models and the output that your algorithms are generating. And part of that is, one, being able to have the technology that you need, but also two, being able to have easy to build visualizations or be able to create reports very easily and tell a story to the business. And then finally deliver a shareable asset or a notebook or a dashboard of different types to other members of the business, right? And so that's really important, and ultimately what Zeppo delivers and what I'll show you guys here today. I'm showing this now, and then I'll also show it at the end, but just so that as a follow-up to this, we'd love to engage a little bit further to hear more about your specific use cases. Oftentimes we do a 14-day guided trial with you to really drive home the value of Zeppo for your business or your organization. So more than happy to engage in a little bit more hands-on way after the call. Okay, with that, I'm gonna jump over and share my Chrome browser. And the intent behind this, everyone, is for you to follow along. So I would ask that my plan here. Oops. One second while I pull this up. My plan here is to basically show everything first, and then go back through it and guide everyone through the process of what we're doing. So for the very first step, or the first thing that I want everyone to do or follow me through, is to navigate to www.zeppo.com. and actually sign up for a free trial. So within the free trial, you get $400 worth of free credits. So that should be, you know, a good starting place for you in order to get going on our platform and start, you know, one or two of your initial use cases. And you get 30 days in order to run that free trial. So once everyone's here, just kind of checking in, you know, navigate to www.zeppo.com and then select start for free. So this button here in the top right. We're going to go through a very simple setup process where go ahead and enter your business email or your email address that you'll remember. Mine here is zshansky at zeppo.com. And then go ahead and select next. If I'm going too fast or too slow, please tell me. It's hard to tell because I can't see your shining faces and so forth. So just go through the setup process here, verify that you are not a robot, and click next. Enter your personal info. I'm going to give this the company name is what will show up as a label for your specific organization you're building. Mine will be called Lab 1. This is the first hands-on lab that we're running in a series, and then give yourself a password. Okay, agree to the terms, and then click next. And that should drop you right into your very own Zeppo organization. Now, if you have a team member on this call, or someone that you would want to start collaborating with, that's one of the core tenets of Zeppo, and I'll show you later how you would begin to approach that. But what we just did was got each individual person on a different Zeppo account or a Zeppo organization. But commonly, what we see is that companies want to have one Zeppo org and then invite multiple people into that org to have a centralized place where all of the data science work or all of your notebooks will be executing and you can share them effectively. So I'm presuming that everyone's on this screen here. Just to orient you really quickly with what we have going on, we have our recent notebooks at the top, so things that you personally as the user have recently worked on. And then we have our spaces down here at the bottom. Now you can think of space as a logical way to group notebooks together, but they can be really effectively used as a way to provide access control for specific teams or maybe specific notebook types. Like let's say you have a report notebook that gets run on a schedule and you only want people to be able to see that in a read-only view. You might create a new space called read-only or report notebooks and apply some access control that way in Zeppo. What I would like you guys all to do is click on the new space button and let's create our first space. I'm going to call mine data science experiments. You can give it a description. There's also ways to import existing work from external repositories like S3, bulk uploads from GitHub, or your Zeppelin environment. Today, uncheck this and we will actually just do a single notebook upload here, and I'll show you how to do that in just a second. So create that space, and now we are within the respective space in this shared environment. What I want to do now is talk about a few things really quickly. So we discussed access control and inviting users or members into the same org. Well, oops, let me go slow here. So in the top right of the screen, there are two icons. One is settings, one is the share. Go ahead and select the share icon. You should be brought to a screen similar to this. So I want to, while we don't have any other users or teams built yet, I would just want to share the experience that you would have if you wanted to invite a single user to also have access to this space, or a team, which is a group of users. If you would, go ahead and select everyone in this organization, and you should see a drop down here And if you expand it, there's a lot of out-of-the-box access control that we have built into the product that can make it really nice workflow for you to have a shared space like this. So commonly, you might want to have people be able to clone notebooks and read them, but you don't want anyone else to be able to run the notebooks in this space. Alternatively, you might have a more shared type environment where everyone can see everything and you just grant permissions in a more liberal way. This might be a good approach to have collaborative workspaces and collaborative permissions given to the entire org or a specific team or member. In this case, for now, I'm going to save this as a collaboration access control pre-built in there, and then go ahead and save it down here at the bottom. All right, great. Now we've started, we kind of have built the foundation for, for sharing notebooks. Now let's actually create our first notebook. Instead of creating one from scratch, what I'd like to do is import one. So there's an import button here. If you select that, you should see a screen pop up. There's two ways to import notebooks. One is from a URL, the other is from a file. And you can add a title here. I'm going to give it lab01 and call it, let's see, anomaly detection notebook. Then what do we put in the link to your notebook? So that everyone is aware, I have a public Git repository called Getting Started on Zeppo. You all can access this, but the notebook that I want to import is this one called Start JSON. And I will share the public link with everyone here in the chat. So if you would please with me, there's the link that we need in order to upload this notebook, and copy that link and place it into the link to your notebook input here.
Sometimes it's tough to copy from chat. So if you just click on it and right click to copy, that'll copy it to your notepad.
Thanks, Lise. And then click apply. I'm sure some of you have already done so. If I was on the other end of the phone, I would have gotten here by now as well. So, all right, very good. So what happens when you import a notebook? Just to paint the picture, this is actually a notebook that I built in Zeppo. It could have been something that, see, someone did not get the, oh, here we go. I sent it to only the panelists. I need to send it to the attendees. That's much more important. Can you see the link now?
Yeah, it says to all panelists and attendees.
Okay, great. And I'll just back up one step here just so you have a reference. Again, click the import button in your spaces and then add the link to the pop-up window and then click apply. All right, so everyone should be on this screen with our shared space. Now, this is a notebook that I built in Zeppo, but it could be one that you had imported from Zeppelin or from a Jupyter notebook, all of which would be the same. We can support both of those. What I want to do before jumping into any of the data science work that we might be doing in this notebook is talk about some of the features specific to Zeppo that make the notebook experience here and that workflow really nice. So first things first that we'd want to do is set up our environment. And in order to do that, we have to go ahead and select with me the settings tab here inside of your notebook. And when you do, you'll see a pop-up. This pop-up window will give you a resource type as well as a default interpreter. Starting with the interpreter, this is the language that we select by default, but you'll notice that there are a number of languages that you can that are supported all within the same notebook. This just happens to be the default one. Go ahead and select Python, and we'll use the Python as the default interpreter since most of the code here, or all of the code rather, is written in Python. If you're a Spark user, you can use Scala or PySpark. Those are all supported methods as well. Okay. The next thing that you'll want to do is set up your resource type. And inside of Zeppo, we have this concept of resources. So when you click run on a notebook, we'll spin up a container. The nice advantage of that is that we manage all of the containerized environment, and it gives every single data scientist or every single analyst that might be working in Zeppo their own workspace. That allows you to, one, scale up really quickly, depending on whatever part of the model building or training process that you're in, to provide additional resource or memory capacity. We're constantly expanding these compute resources. The other advantage that this gives you is that since every notebook is running its own container, you don't deal with this noisy neighbor problem where if someone's workload on a shared server maybe is taking up or consuming all of the resources, or someone's workload crashes, it's not going to affect the work that you're doing within your own container. So that becomes really nice for a shared environment. Let's go ahead and select the medium, Python as our default interpreter, and click apply. The one other thing that I like to do when I'm first starting out in Zeppo is to also make an initial commit. So what does that mean? We have a built-in version control that on the right side of the screen, if you select this icon here, excuse me, I like to make an initial commit to say, here's my starting point. And in order to do that, I can always roll back to the original version. Now, if if you don't do this and you just start working and going, Zeppo will automatically version control any code change that you make or any result set change that you make. Okay, so it looks like we have, most people are caught up here, but let me just pause. Everyone was able to import the notebook properly. Okay. Just to recap, all that we've done so far is imported the notebook. We've set up our environment variables up here in the notebook settings, selected a resource type, selected Python as our default interpreter, and clicked apply. The final thing that we did was we selected the auto version control feature in Zeppo and clicked on create a new version or name a current version. And then we created an initial commit. Okay.
Is that just a time check? We're at about half past the hour.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll get moving. One of the nice things about having the notebook pre-built is that, let's say, for example, that we don't get all the way finished through this. You'll have this set up in your own environment that you can work through it. But what I really want to drill home is some of the key features in Zeppo that make the notebook workflow really usable, help increase the velocity that you guys are able to produce models and then also be able to share them. So along those lines, the next thing that you will likely want to do in a notebook is to install a specific library or import libraries. So Zeppo comes out of the box with 100+ libraries for each of the programming languages that you might use. But of course, sometimes we can't predict everything that you'll need. So we want to give you the flexibility to also install libraries. So doing things like a pip installation is really simple, and I'm just sharing that here. The next thing I would say, let's actually go ahead and run this first cell here and get started. So in there's a few ways that you can run notebooks. One is to click this button at the top. You run every single paragraph. If you want to run an individual paragraph, which we're going to do here, go ahead and either press this button on the specific paragraph to run it, or hold shift and press enter when you have your cursor inside that paragraph. So go ahead and run this here, and let's install this library. And as that's running, the first thing that happens is that we will start a container, like I talked about, attach a specific memory size, and this will run this will run for as long as you're interacting with it, and then shut down automatically after 60 minutes of runtime. or of idle time, excuse me. So now that this has executed, one small thing that I would highlight here is a few of these different options on the specific paragraph, one of which being the show output. If you select that, you'll see a lengthy output down below that paragraph. That may not be very useful for a presentation. You can hide that really easily by just selecting the same icon to hide it. I have it hidden by default. But that executed properly, the next thing that we should do is run the import libraries. So go ahead and run that next paragraph for me. Okay, once that is done, again, you can check the output. We're going to be using a few libraries here. One is the TensorFlow. You'll see that we're using Keras here, as well as scikit-learn primarily. Now, the next paragraph below is just a simple example for you that to show that we can make these notebooks very interactive. Commonly, if you have a group of users or analysts that are less technical and they don't want to interact with code, what I'd recommend is, I'm going to show you what this code looks like. What I'd recommend is creating a few text-based inputs or a drop-down list, which is something that we can do as well. In this case, I'm giving the user the ability to select a specific data source, as well as a database table name. So you can kind of control what users are able to interact with inside of your notebook without having to write any code. Go ahead and run this paragraph, and then we should have all those values loaded into memory. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is connect to our data source. So that can be done in two different ways, right? Some people are using Snowflake today, some people aren't. That's okay. What I'm showing you first is a programmatic way to connect to Snowflake. It's quite simple, right? It's about 10 lines of code here. But one of the challenges, we're actually going to use this method during the analysis here. So go ahead and run this paragraph. This should all connect up fine. If you have any problems, please drop a note in the chat. One of the challenges with this methodology is that you have to expose your password in clear text. And while that's fine maybe for a demo lab here, that's not great for a centralized or collaborative workspace that we're providing. So Zeppel's answer to this, and just for the sake of time, I'm gonna just show you how we solve this problem, but we won't actually build it out together, is actually creating a data source object that obfuscates and securely stores this password variable. The way we do that is we reference one single line of code that's called get data source. So we standardize the method for connectivity. And then on the right side, we can actually build out our data sources here from this data source icon. If you click add new, you'll see all of the different data sources that we're leveraging, or that we could leverage from these built-in connectors. There's several that we're working on: Redshift, Athena, Aurora, and so forth. But for Snowflake, if we select that icon here, you could enter in all of those parameters that I had shared in the actual code. And the nice part is that when you enter your role or your username and you enter in your password, it's all encrypted so that no one, and it's hidden so that people won't be able to see what your username password is. Commonly, we have people using single sign-on as well, which becomes a really effective and secure way to connect to data for all of the data scientists or analysts out there. Okay, I went kind of briefly through that. So just to recap, what we've done now is we've set up our environment, we've imported libraries, we've installed a few, and then we connected to Snowflake programmatically through this code. And then we discussed how you can actually, in a more secure method, share these data source connectors using Zeppo. The next thing we want to do is test our connection by actually running a query. So I've built a simple select statement, select star from, and this table variable is actually part of this input value, the result of this input value. So we have an anomaly detection data table in Snowflake. Go ahead, please, and run this paragraph, and let's test our connection. You should get a very simple output. once this completes. Should get a very simple output with the dimensions of the data table or the data frame that we get back. It's around 600 plus 1,000 rows and 11 columns. And then the next section, we're going to display the results of that query. So go ahead and run this. And this will be the first flavor of our, what is the data that we're actually looking at. So we have transactions that have different types of payments and payment types. Okay. Good question. Yeah, so it looks like we had a question about whitelisting IPs. Just for the sake of time, I'm going to continue through this analysis. We'll build out a few visualizations, run through the model, and then we can jump into that question. Great question. So for all of these, we're going to be interacting with all of these different columns throughout the model building. All of the columns will be used for training, as well as predicting on this fraudulent value or fraudulent column and feature. That's ultimately what we want to come up with. All of our data is labeled, but we want to see if we can predict, based off of all these other features, whether a transaction is going to be fraudulent. So now let's skip past the in case of emergency break glass. This was my backup plan. So I think hopefully everyone is past that. We're going to clean up our data set and do just clean up some null values. So go ahead and run that. And then now I want to jump into what we provide as built-in visualizations. So in this first interactive charting visualization paragraph, go ahead and run this. You'll notice that in order to get our visualizations to render, all you need is one line of code. So that is vastly different from a lot of the programmatic ways that data scientists are used to building visualizations. And I think this is one element that can help save a ton of time as you're iterating through these models or delivering reports and making them look really nice. So do this with me here, and I'm going to walk through this slowly. There's a number of visualizations that we can select from. I'd like for you guys to engage and select the pie chart option. And then you should have a blank visualization here. If you expand this charts section, then you should see that there's an interactive view or different columns that we can work with. These columns match our data frame that I shared above. If you drag and drop the type value, so I want to know, what I want to build out is a pie chart around what types of transactions am I getting and how many of them are fraudulent. So go ahead and select the type as the category, drag and drop the type as the value, and we'll count those, and you should start to see your visualization show up. And then ultimately, I want to be able to drill down on the is fraudulent field. So I'm going to create some sort of interactivity where I can actually click on this fraudulent value and drill down into the next layer of this chart. So make sure that your chart looks like this, and there's no code required. All you have to do is drag and drop. What the drill down gives you the capability of is actually selecting one of the pieces of the pie. So if I click on the transfer type, then I should get a new pie chart that shows up with the number of fraudulent transactions for the transfer transaction type and the number of non-fraudulent as well. So sort of a nice way to speed up the data visualization category here and get you up and running. Okay. Is everybody, anyone having issues with that? Or, I'll pause here, see how everyone's tracking. Okay. If you have any questions, again, please drop them in the chat window. I've got that up on the side here so we can get your questions answered. The next type of visualization that I want to walk through is if you run this the paragraph to the right of the chart you just built, I'm going to, or you should already see a pre-populated chart. This chart is using our Plotly editor. I pre-created it for you so that you didn't have to do anything here, just to speed some things up. But if you select the Plotly chart editor button, you'll get to see how I actually built this. So there's multiple traces that you can put onto one single chart, and you can interact with your data frame in the same exact way that we did before. But this Plotly editor gives you a lot more interactivity and a lot more charting options. So things like maps to box plots, and so forth, you can start to really expand the way that your notebooks appear and show up. Okay. So there's a lot to explore here that I won't dive into, but just to note, as you start to build out more advanced visualizations, you can overlay text and label all of your axes and so forth in a really easy method, really easy way. Okay. So that is what I wanted to cover around visualizations. Hopefully that gives you guys some great ideas around what you could do in your own environment or for your own analysis. There were some use cases around customer churn or retail, marketing and clustering. We've got all sorts of different visualizations that can help drive that forward. We worked on a use case with a customer around could we measure the likelihood for a customer to churn or come back as a repeat customer, built out a model notebook and automated that process for them. Similarly, we've looked at customer segmentation analysis by doing some clustering and seeing what types of behavior customers are likely to do for a specific marketing campaign or outreach. So lots of endless possibilities there within the field. And on top of Zeppo. So now that we have, okay, it's 11:40, or at least Pacific time, 11:40. I'm going to run through, let's run through these next couple visualizations very quickly. So comparing fraudulent transactions versus non-fraudulent transactions and all of the different variables that we might compare to see really, what is the skew of our data and what does it look like? It looks like there's a very heavy skew on all of these different transactions. All we're doing here is taking advantage of the data frame operations to grouping values or filtering values. And commonly this could be done in Snowflake before you bring the data back, or you can do it using Python as well. Next, let's build a correlation matrix. So go ahead and run the compare features here. We can get, kind of get a better sense of how each feature actually maps to the next one. And then we have this blank, paragraph here. Go ahead and run that. And finally, what I want to show is that before we can actually do any modeling, we have to see if our data is skewed in any one direction. And it looks like, obviously most transactions are non-fraudulent, so we have to account for that. Our accuracy or our model is going to be it's going to predict that almost every single thing is non-fraudulent because that's the data it's been fed. So there's a few techniques that we employ here in order to do that. So here's where we actually get to the model building, where we split our training data sets and start to actually predict values. So within this code block, I'm not going to go through everything. I'll let you guys kind of explore this on your own after the call here. But what I do want to call out is that this the approach to actually balancing those data sets is something called oversampling or SMOTE, using SMOTE method. And what this does is it actually samples or it upsamples your data to create both fraudulent and non-fraudulent predictions that have the same exact number of predictions in your training data set. And that'll allow us to train more effectively. So go ahead and run this oversampling train test split. There's no output because we aren't printing anything to the screen, but these subsequent paragraphs down here will actually display a really nice, we're just rendering HTML, and you can kind of clean this up if you'd like by hiding the editor. But what I want to share is that now we have oversampled a data set to say all of our fraudulent and non-fraudulent transactions have the same number of predicted values, so that when we come to this next section here and actually build our model, so you'll see that we're using sequential, which is a Keras specific model that we're taking advantage of. We're going to actually layer on multiple tests for each different run through within the model predictions. And then at the very end, we're actually going to fit and train that model here and visualize the accuracy and loss, as well as how well did our model perform. So go ahead and feel free to run this paragraph. This one I have hidden the output by default, but if you wanted to see what the output looked like, you'll actually see this thing updating in real time. And once it has completed all of its pass-throughs, that kind of might give you a seizure. Hold on. We'll wait for that to finish.
And Zach, we've got a question, couple questions in here. Name DF2 is not defined over sample to balance our data set failed.
Oh, okay. Yep. Let's see. That is probably failing here. And then we create our DF2 value inside of this specific paragraph. So where we're showing our skewed results. Did you run this paragraph yet? So if you scroll up and you run the data is very skewed paragraph, you should be able to get that variable built. One thing, you got it. All right, awesome. Yeah, and it's a good question. Also, something that is really useful too is as you start to build out really large notebooks, we have this outline view, which makes it super easy to snap to, sort of like a table of contents, right? This has been really helpful for large analysis. And if you wanted to use this, you could kind of snap to specific sections on your notebook. I'm glad you got that working though. Okay, excellent. So scrolling down, coming back to where we were. So inside of the train test model using Keras paragraph, what I want to show you guys is the output. It's one important thing here is that we're supporting really any of the machine learning libraries that you would commonly need to use inside of your data science platform. So that's really, really helpful. And I just wanted to share, you can see you can see these numbers improving, the accuracy and the loss improving as we continue to train through multiple epochs here, which is part of the approach of Keras. So, okay, I'm being warned that I have a limited amount of time, everyone, so I apologize if I'm going quickly, but let's finish up the analysis. So last 3 paragraphs to run: visualize your accuracy and loss. I've hidden the code here, but essentially, what we're doing here is writing code in order to produce 2 visualizations. We could really easily produce these visualizations, or more easily produce them with a single line of code if we just use the z.show function that we referenced earlier for our visualization library. The next thing that I want to do is run the prediction results. So we'll kind of get a confusion matrix of our precision, recall, and accuracy. And then finally, this last paragraph, we just do a nice pretty print of our actual result and accuracy.
We had one other question, Zach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, you're looking at it.
I understand why the 2 similar boxes of code, z.show, Python, return 2 different kinds of graphs. Okay. So I believe that question is, if we jump back up here to our visualizations, was that why was the question, why do these produce 2 different types of graphs? Just want to confirm. Okay. Yeah, great question. So while it's the same line of code, you can think of it this way. What we're trying to do is streamline the approach that every person or data scientist or analyst uses to create visualizations. And instead of writing a really nasty, like we might have to do, like I was showing down here, where we had to write, in order to produce 2 different graphs, we had to write all these lines of code. What we're replacing all those lines of code with are a single line of code called z.show, which gives you the flexibility to choose and interact with your data in a more click-through or UI-centric way. The different charting options that we support here out of the box with Zeppo charts are these ones as follows, and that's what the pie chart is. Now, there's also something called a Plotly editor, which we built into our product. So this is something that you would actually have to pay for if you were using separately in a different environment. But we've put it into the product, and that's what this other visualization is showing. So there's a little bit of overlap in functionality, but it's really choose your preference. And oh yeah, it's really only one line of code in order to do all of this visualization and create whatever, have a dynamic way to create whatever it is that you want to build. I personally prefer the Plotly charting editor because I think it has a really nice visual interface to, add things like different X and Y axes and so forth. And you can just kind of click through this way. You can overlay, information right in line with, let's say you wanted to add like a piece of text here that says, take a look at this specific data point. Is this fraud? There's a lot of flexibility here with the different charting options that, fraud. Well, I misspelled that, that you get. So hopefully that helps answer your question of why those are different. No more matplotlib. Exactly. Yeah, you got it. That's saving a lot of time. So the last thing before Elise kicks me off of this is I want to talk about sharing. So we went through this analysis and we came up with a result, displaying our accuracy and our loss. And this might be something that you want to share with your team. There's a few ways that you can do that. One is through, again, this access control screen here, where you are able to interact all through Zeppo and create access control. The other 2 ways are around, one is sharing an individual paragraph. So you'll notice that there's a lot of settings for this specific paragraph. There's one called link to this paragraph. My suggestion is, okay, well, of course my demo didn't work here, but what this renders here when you share a link is an iframe in another page that is currently and up to date with the latest run of your notebook. So that can be a really quick and easy way to share results with people that have Zeppo accounts, right? So this is going to be governed. This link is going to be governed by access control as well. The last thing that you could do and is more broadly shareable is share the entire notebook. So you can publish these notebooks here using a public link, and then render the notebook maybe more as like a dashboard. And the nice thing about this is once you get your reports to a shareable view, all these things are still interactive, and you can really easily just through a given link share all the work and reports that you've done. You can hide code, you can show it. It just kind of depends on what method you want to take. So that's all that I have for you guys today. I hope that this was a useful hands-on lab. And at the very least, you have your own Zeppo environment up and running, free trial, 30 days. You have $400 in free credits. You can track your trial period and usage all within the settings tab down here. And so you can see that, just over the course of this time, I've used only 1 credit. And so I encourage you guys to start using this for different use cases, connect to your Snowflake data warehouse, and start playing around with this. Ultimately, we would love to engage with you as a next step, and I will stop sharing my screen here, pull up the PowerPoint, and see if there's specific questions that we can answer.
Zach, that was great. Really appreciate that.
There was one question about IP whitelisting, and I was curious about maybe to hear more. But as far as IP whitelisting, we have on our public documentation the endpoints or the IPs that you would need to whitelist in order to interact with Zeppo, or have Zeppo interact with other applications if that's what you're concerned. So I know sometimes people will do whitelisting or blacklisting in Snowflake. You would have to whitelist Zeppo in order to have us be able to connect, but that's a really quite trivial process.
Great. Somebody asked, we have a large worldwide team. Are there any limits as to number of users on either Zeppo or Snowflake?
Yeah, great question. Definitely no limits. That's one of the nice things about creating the collaborative workspace is it's one, we have the access control built in to make sure that it's a secure type of sharing environment. And two, the way that we've architected the solution by building out containers, being able to scale those up and down really effectively also provides that ability to scale to really an endless number of users. So I would encourage you to try to break it and bring as many people onto the platform as possible, because the more that you can share, the more impactful the work is that you're doing as a data science team.
Great, Zach. Thank you. Well, I don't think we have any more questions. Great job. This was super helpful. And please, folks, we invite you to reach out to Zach if you've got any further questions or would like to chat more about your own specific use cases. Thanks so much and have a great day.
Thank you, everybody.